Welcome to another episode of TechXY Turbo. My name is Frank Gullo, and I am your host. Today we're joined by a guest whose name has become synonymous with the Western New York startup scene, Jack McGowan. For decades, Jack has been a steady hand and open door for entrepreneurs seeking capital, guidance, and connection. He leads both the Buffalo Angels and the Western New York Venture Association, two cornerstones of our region's startup ecosystem. In this episode, Jack and I talk about how Buffalo's tech economy grew from grassroots efforts into a cohesive community of innovators. We'll unpack what has changed most over his 30-plus year career, some of the startups he has mentored, and what it really takes to build a sustainable innovation network in a region once known primarily for manufacturing and steel. So Jack, it is so great to have you. We've talked about this for several months, and I'm glad we're able to make it happen. So thank you for joining. How are you today?
I'm great, Frank. So glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. So Jack, this is a tech podcast, and for everyone who comes on, let's start with your tech story. You began your career as a commercial banker in the 1980s, a very different era technologically. How has your relationship with tech evolved as you've worked with hundreds of tech startups over the past 3 decades?
So thinking through this, I obviously started in the Stone Age. Everything was paper-based. Really, it was just, it's can't believe it. So I would handwrite memos and they would go to a secretary who would type them on a word processing machine, and then you'd proof them. It was just like unbelievable. Written memos, interoffice mail envelopes that would go from building to building or floor to floor. He was great. We got fax machines. So we were like really modern with that. You'd go to the library to do research on companies. Got the first cellular phone was the thing that was installed in the car, this big heavy thing. Eventually we got big lunky computers. So it was so different. So it was just unbelievable, thinking about it.
Right. Yeah, that you bring up a good point. So I obviously work in the staffing industry, and I tell people sometimes, resumes once were paper, right? And people had to type them or scan them in. I think there's such a sense of everything working immediately that people forget a lot that built the system and still there. So, okay, so let's advance past the Stone Age and go back to 2009 when Bright Buffalo Niagara launched. And I actually think that's when we met because I was involved in the planning board for those events. So for you, the question, what were the tech companies like back then, circa 2009? What kinds of technologies were entrepreneurs building, and how has that changed over the years as you've watched the ecosystem grow?
Yeah. So when we started, so I guess to start, Western New York, upstate New York, has always had a diverse base of technologies. We've never really focused on one or two particular things. So that was the case then, but there were areas of emphasis that have shifted a little bit. So when Bright Buffalo Niagara started out, it was largely sponsored by UV. And so there was more of an emphasis on biomedical companies. There were companies that were at they had the Center of Excellence in Bioinformatics and Life Sciences, and the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus, and Roswell Park, and Houtman Woodward. So things were technologies that were coming out of there. So drug development and diagnostics, medical devices. But there was a lot of healthcare, IT, other software companies, B2B software, online marketplaces, advertising tech, social networks, apps, materials, ed tech, electronics, a variety. And then you'd have some real just kind of traditional stuff, food products or recycling of rubber tires or, a real variety of stuff. But there was more of an emphasis at the time on the medical side, which has sort of slipped away a little bit, I think, compared to what we're seeing now.
Right. Let me dig into that a little bit because I remember that too. The heavy bioinformatics focus, even in the branding. So you've seen at least, I think, 100 companies at Bright alone, plus hundreds more through Western New York Venture Association and 43 North. So to your point, what tech sectors have you seen come and go? And of the emerging techs, which ones really delivered on the promise?
Yeah. So, it's interesting because, there have been different technologies, but, my focus and the focus of investors is really it's on the businesses rather than the technologies themselves. One of the big differences is that from an investor standpoint, as a community, there's not a lot of money, and risk tolerance is relatively modest here compared to some other areas. Something that was real, I think, really was spot on. There's a firm out of based on the West Coast called Startup IQ that was in upstate New York last week for the New York State Innovation Conference, and they wrote a piece about when they came back. We're on the plane back. The differences between upstate New York and and the Bay Area, and number one was just the amount of funding, but also the community in upstate New York worked very much together. But they drew that distinction between on the West Coast, it's blitz scale or die companies. They consume a ton of money. They raise a lot of money. It's go big or go home. Whereas in upstate New York, we're looking for companies that have an actual path. They've identified customers. There's a path to profitability in a couple of years, because that next round of capital is less likely to be there. So ours, even though they're based on a technology, the focus is more on kind of basic business blocking and tackling, rather than we're making plays in technology areas, and we can throw a lot of money at a number of players in that space, and one or two of them that are going to win, and we'll come out ahead of the game. So it was very, very different on the tech focus versus business focus and the founders' qualifications and what traction had they got so far. So that's a distinction that we have compared to, and I think a lot of the country has compared to the New York City or the Bay Area.
Yeah, that's a very helpful distinction. Thank you for drawing that out. And certainly, if you've gone to 43 North over the years, you've really seen that and how polished and advanced some of the firms are. And speaking of the business side and the funding, one of your specialties is helping startups access funding, including federal grants specifically for tech research and development. So can you explain what kinds of tech innovations these grants typically support? And for you, what's the coolest tech you've ever helped a company get funded to develop?
Sure. So the big program is a federal program called SBIR, is the acronym, Small Business Innovation Research. And as the name implies, these are, the federal government is looking to fund innovative research and development, but that has strong commercial potential. So it's not tech for tech's sake. They're because it's taxpayer dollars. They're hoping that if the development is successful, there will be successful businesses behind that as well. They have a wide range of topics. 11 federal agencies participate, and it's Department of Defense, National Institutes of Health, Department of Agriculture, National Science Foundation. So they've got different areas of interest. They'll fund a very broad, whatever you're working on. If it's a legitimate technology, there's probably an opportunity to apply for something there. But the bulk of the money through this program is through the Department of Defense. So a lot of it is defense-related stuff, but for instance, healthcare funded by defense is huge because, they've got needs for taking care of their war fighters and what have you. But so also, healthcare is big through other agencies as well, through SBIR. Advanced materials is another big one. Energy, but almost anything you want. Education is another big one. So it's a great program for early stage development. That without that, a lot of the technologies wouldn't get the chance to be developed. As far as the most interesting one that I've worked with, I guess I'd pick a company called name of it is Helios NRG. They grow algae. They've got a refined system to increase the productivity of growing this algae. And what are the benefits of that? Why do you do this? Well, number one, it captures carbon. So it has an environmental component of taking that carbon and converting it to, algae, which can then be used as feedstock. It can be made into biofuel. It can be made into nutraceuticals. So it's got many potential uses. And, they've gotten, several grants to refine their processes of production, scale it up, those types of things. So it was a pretty cool company.
Yeah, that is great. Thank you for that. Those are rich nuggets. So everyone listening will have everything Jack mentioned in the transcript, for future reference. So speaking again of the business side, so you've mentioned seeing a lot of change over the 30 years working with companies, and you've seen multiple tech innovations as all of us living through it. So hardware, manufacturing, the internet, now AI. So especially on the business side, how have these innovations changed the way startups operate and show up? And how has it affected what investors are looking for? Or hasn't it? Is it the same?
Well, it has a lot. I mean, the advances in technology have really raised the ability and the expectations for being able to get to market, develop more quickly, get to market more quickly, do things at lower costs, be more efficient, and be able to get the word out in ways that years ago you couldn't do. With all the communication technologies and social media. So in order to be competitive, startups need to be using these technologies. Again, they're not necessarily, in some cases, developing a new technology, but they're users of this technology to effectively, establish and grow their businesses.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So I want to talk a little bit about our ecosystem. We're both in Buffalo. And Jack, you and I have crossed paths many times over many years through the Buffalo tech community. And I've always valued your insights and friendship when we've had time to connect. And one thing I've noticed is you've always been incredibly consistent in helping entrepreneurs understand that with their tech, no matter how high tech it is, it's both the tech and clearly articulating it, explaining it. So from what you've seen, what tech communication challenges have you seen founders struggle with the most?
Sure. Many times founders' background and experience is tech. It's what they're developing. And you've got the classic. There's engineers, there's marketing people, and they don't think alike, and and sometimes that's the case. So I think a big part of it is focus. When communicating, you need to focus on the audience. What will the audience understand? What's important to the audience? How do I explain it in to an educated layperson or to, my grandmother at Thanksgiving dinner, that, she's going to understand what this thing is and what it's supposed to do. So that's an important part of it. Kind of an approach I always take, I've learned, is that when explaining, it's talking about the benefits. So what is I can explain the details and I can, some features, but what is the benefit that it's going to provide to the user? And then what's the reason that a user should believe that it can actually provide those benefits? So, support it somehow. It's been tested, or, it's in use in a lot of the cases, or something that, so why do I believe that, you can provide this benefit to this product or service? And then also what's different about it? If it's just a me too, you're probably not going to do much and make much noise in the marketplace because there's others out there already doing it. So, what's special about what you have? So you can communicate that, that overt benefit, the real reason to believe in the dramatic difference. It's an effective way for, targeted audiences to understand what it is you're talking about.
Yeah, it makes sense. Do you feel the charisma of the founder, just kind of a follow-up, makes a lot of difference? Have you seen these larger than life founders be able to convey just by how charismatic they are?
Yes, but sometimes that's a problem. There is a risk of kind of falling in love with the founder and their presentation skills. Obviously, they need to be good communicators if they're going to sell and if they're going to motivate people and their staff, whatever. But you need to really make that distinction about, are they what they're telling me the straight story, or are they just spinning a good tale? So you need to be careful.
Right. Great. So I work in tech, and sometimes I feel overwhelmed with all of the tools that we have today. From your side of things, I'm wondering, what digital tools and platforms most make the whole ecosystem work? Like, how do the founders apply? I mean, no, we have the 43 North, but beyond that, how do mentors connect with them? And how do the investors get information? What's your role? And how do you keep track of it all? It seems like a lot of information to kind of harness.
Yeah, it's a mix and it's evolving. So most groups will have some sort of an online platform that companies can apply to. We happen to use, there's one called Gus that a lot of groups use, and they can submit an application and upload their documents and videos and their pitch deck and what have you. And then our members have access to that information, so they can get it as well. So, again, a lot have that. Some will have proprietary, some groups or a VC firm might have a proprietary application on their, through their website. And there's a number of them. But, there's a lot of plain old Excel, email, that's still, most of the, the contacts I get from, founders who are looking to raise money, it's by email. Yeah, that's still the number one thing. And, I still use Excel to track, a lot of the information about our group. So it's a mix. Every company, I would recommend, they set up a deal data room that's going to have their pitch deck and their financials and their projections and their business plan and targeted customer lists and that kind of stuff that investors will want to see in due diligence. And there are some commercial ones. There's a local company called Finta that has, it's a platform where, companies can, put up their information, investors can have access to it. And there are some others as well. There's a local company called Veravend that processes payments and also stores documents on deals. But there's, some people use Airtable and Google Docs, and there are different ways of having that information stored and access to people who need it.
Great. No, thanks for that and that level of detail. So we're sitting here mid-November. So it was about a month ago, we gathered at 43 North for Shays. And, for those who don't know, Shays, it's quite an awesome spectacle when the founders' final night. So when you've watched tech founders pitch at Shays over the years in front of 3,000 plus people, what tech trends, in your opinion, have dominated the competition over the years? And what surprised you over the years?
Yeah. So similar to what we experienced with the Bright Buffalo Niagara Forum, there was more biotech in the earlier years of 43 North than there is now. And I think, the reason for that is that, biotech just takes so long and so much money to develop. The bigger the problem, the bigger the potential benefit, but also the longer it takes and the more money it takes and what have you. So I think that through experience, they found that it wasn't as much of a fit with the community as they had hoped. A big emphasis now at 43 North is, companies that are a fit with the Buffalo community. So if a company comes here, are there potential customers here? Particularly if it's a business to business, are there companies that could be potential customers or collaborators? Or if it's a company that's going to need to manufacture a product, are there manufacturers in Western New York that that they can be connected to? So that Buffalo fit has become a higher criteria, and it disqualifies certain types of companies that just we don't have much of a presence here. There's also been a shift with Top Seeds winning a couple of years ago, which is a food company.
I have those in my house. Yes, I do buy those. I eat those.
Everybody does. They make a wonderful cracker. It's kind of a unique thing. So people were, at that, at the end of that show, everyone was like, can't believe they won, because, the focus has always been on tech companies. But given the success of Top Seeds, they've expanded their operations here. They seem to be doing quite well. You see more, consumer product and food companies that are making it to the finals. Another company, Food Nerd, was a winner last year, and there are others. So they've demonstrated a fit and that it works for the model 43 North.
Yeah, no, I think it also goes back to your earlier point about business maturity. It seems like the ecosystem, you see that scale, right, where you're starting all the way up to 5, and the maturity is evident over 10 plus years, for sure. And this is getting into the exciting part of the talk. So let's talk about some wins, Jack. ACV Auctions, a great story, became Buffalo's first tech unicorn, went public, and other portfolio companies have grown significantly. So for you, from your insight, what technologies were these successful companies building, and what patterns have you seen among the tech startups that thrive here versus those that have struggled or had to leave?
Mm-hmm. I think, again, it tends to be business reasons rather than the technology. I think, companies that are users of technology, they're not necessarily developing a platform technology, they're not ChatGPT, but maybe they are applying AI to solve a problem for potential customers. So some examples of that, companies that have been successful, we've got Campus Labs. They were a company that, had software product, for colleges and universities. They were successful, they got acquired, they've grown nicely. You already mentioned ACV, they started out as an app to auction cars between new car dealers and used car dealers. It wasn't, extremely novel technology, but they understood their marketplace. And then, once they started to get, they got a base of business, they have continued to evolve their product offerings. So now they have hardware that can detect the status, of the vehicle, by listening to it. It can, assess the health of the vehicle. They provide, services to facilitate the transactions on, exchanging titles and that kind of stuff. So they've taken that initial core, which they use to get into the marketplace, and they've expanded out. So using various technologies, some which they did invent themselves, but they didn't start off, they were, a software app to start with. There are others, Liaison, is a company that was, started here, successful, and they were a marketplace for, employee benefits, where they could, an employer could offer a variety of benefits that their employees could choose. So, not necessarily technologically earth-shaking, but, applying technology to solve a problem that people were willing to pay for. You've got a few that are like biomed, medical. I mean, a lot of that is does it work? Does it cure the condition or whatever? So that's the big part of it. And there's some others. I mean, Spark Charge was one. They were a 43 North winner. Mobile, a mobile vehicle, like EV charging service, hadn't been done before. They've got some technology in their hardware, but there's also the service component as well. So the business skills of the management team and the ability to execute and the ability to pivot and expand, I think are really key factors, rather than what that initial core product or service or technology, that you're starting with.
Right. Great points. And I think, it keeps coming back to business and the importance of that for growth as well as scale. So Jack, you recently received the Community Catalyst Award from Upstate Venture Connect for your decades of service to founders and investors. What does that recognition mean to you personally? And what advice would you give to the next generation of community builders who want to create the same kind of impact?
Yeah. Well, it was, it was a wonderful honor. I mean, I was very, very humbled by it. And, I'm glad for the recognition of being, doing what I love to do. I mean, that's, the whole reason for, why I've been doing this for as long as I do is that I'm helping, hopefully helping, founders to be successful or increase their chances of success, for both, the benefit of them and their companies, their employees, and for the community as well. So that's the higher level, why I do what I do. I've been very lucky to work for an organization. So, I work for Insight Consulting. We're a not-for-profit economic development purpose company. So, these things that I'm doing that other people, are thinking, wow, you're always here. Well, it's like, yeah, it's my job. I mean, a lot of it is I'm doing stuff nights and startup weekends and things. I mean, I'm volunteering a lot of my time, as well, but it is, at the core, I'm allowed to do this because it's my job, which is wonderful. And I've also had, the support of my family too, which is very important because without that, it wouldn't work. But one of the great things, I mean, each founder or investor or ecosystem partner, that I engage with, I'm learning. So I'm always learning about, what is a new technology or, a new market or a new practice that they're doing. And then, I can kind of take the best of those and then, without, disclosing anything confidential to anybody, but, I can help others, who, by learn from, what's working for others and what's not working for others. So hopefully, can raise the tide and have more be successful. It's interesting. There's, Brad Feld, he's got his, give first, mantra, and also, through Techstars, to develop the mentor manifesto. I would encourage, everyone to take a look at that. It's really good stuff, treating people with respect and, not acting like you know it all. And there have quite a few bullets there. But the interesting thing is that, I hadn't read those until fairly recently. I'm looking at it like, well, yeah, this is just the way, there's nothing revolutionary here. This is just the way people should treat each other and how you should work effectively. So it was very, very reinforcing that, kind of the stuff I've been doing and the approach that I take has been, kind of codified and expanded and publicized through some pretty big name people in Brad Feld and Techstars.
Great. So we're going to link to that. Thank you for mentioning that. And Jack, thank you. I thank you, thank Insight, thank your family for making you available for all these 30 years. We've all benefited and we hope, that you'll continue to thrive. And last question, I want to get into, first of all, it's been a real pleasure having you, hearing these insights. A lot of people have asked me, about starting a company. I'm like, well, let's just record Jack so you can hear it from Jack. So I think, you've been a mentor and connector for so many in our region's tech ecosystem, myself included. And I want to thank you for your decades of leadership, for continuing to champion entrepreneurs and innovation in Western New York. So where can listeners connect with you and learn more about Western New York Venture Association, Buffalo Angels? I know you know the ecosystem so well, and we assume everybody kind of hears of it or they go to 43 North, but there are people who it's new, right? They move here. So for those who are new, who may not know the backstory like we do, or transplants, what would you say? How can they reach out to you? How do you prefer to be connected with?
Sure. They can find me on LinkedIn. If you search Jack McGowan or Jack McGowan Buffalo, I will pop up, pretty quickly. Feel free to connect and reach out. The website for the Venture Association is www.wnyventure.com. You can, connect through email, either through that site or, my work email is listed on my LinkedIn profile. And I encourage people to contact me. I mean, I talk to everybody, and if I can't help them, which again, many times I can't, I will do my best to, make introductions or point them in the direction of the other resources in the community, because a lot of them has built up. When I like to say that when I started doing this, you could count the supporters of entrepreneurship in Western New York on one hand. The ecosystem has grown amazingly around. And I've had the fortune to know them. So, I can point people in the right direction as far as other potential funders or programs that provide, assistance and guidance. And a lot of times that's the most value I'm adding is just, helping, point them in the direction of the right people that can help them out.
Great. And with that, Jack, thank you for all of your wisdom and insights, and looking forward to doing this again sometime. Thanks.
Right. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.